All right, everyone. Kamala Harris is getting roundly pounded right now. Not by Willie Brown either. Getting massively ratioed on Twitter, on the official VP account, no less. So I didn't bother to archive it because under U.S. law, that kind of account, they can't scrub their material. It's taxpayer funded. I'm going to read this for you verbatim. And then we'll talk about the ratio. 12,000 people liked it, which means there's 12,000 complete morons out there somewhere. 41,000 people commented. That's called a ratio. And there are numerous replies that are getting far more likes than the original post. It's another sign of a ratio. Here's what Kamala decided to say the other day. And even some liberals are like, maybe, it's making him nervous, I think. The people of Lebanon are facing an increasingly dire humanitarian situation. So this isn't Lebanon, the county in North Carolina. This is the country. I am concerned about the security and well-being of civilians suffering in Lebanon. We'll continue working to help meet the needs of all civilians there. To that end, the United States will provide nearly $157 million in additional assistance to the people of Lebanon for essential needs, such as food, shelter, water, protection, and sanitation, the things that the North Carolinians could use right now, to help those who have been displaced by the recent conflict. This additional support brings total U.S. assistance to Lebanon over the last year to over $385 million. And people are noting, right now, all of that assistance should be going to North Carolina. Also, we're selling Israel and then giving Israel the munitions that they're using to pound Lebanon. Well, if you're worried about a humanitarian crisis, then why the hell are you funding both sides? Now, the answer is quite simple. It makes money. This is all taxpayer money that we're talking about. The taxpayers had to fund the bombs. The taxpayers are funding this assistance. The government can't make any money of its own. Meanwhile, though, the arms companies, they're making money hand over fist. That's really, it's just a grift. It's basically a shakedown. And people have begun to notice this now. Liberals used to understand this. Remember, like back in the Iraq War era. It's the liberals that were complaining about this sort of thing. You'd bomb a city and then you'd rebuild it and everyone makes a lot of money. Contractors, arms dealers, developers and so forth, and governments, they all made a lot of money. Now liberals, because of partisan politics being the way they are, appear to have decided to get cognitive dissonance. They're like, well, it's different this time. This time it's different. And the funny thing is the left is actually like solidly a team like Palestine / Hezbollah and Hamas and so forth sometimes. And now it's the right wing of politics that's more complaining about it. We should not be funding both sides. There's no reason to give anything to Israel at this point. They've been shot full of steroids in the military sense. They don't need the help. There should be no need to rebuild the lives of the Lebanese people. And you watch what'll happen. You'll end up with waves of refugees admitted to the United States. So the United States government robs the taxpayers, gives a bunch of munitions to Israel, says, yeah, go kill them. Israel bombs Lebanon, naturally, because we know that in such a kerfuffle, you're necessarily going to get Hezbollah involvement. So they pit bomb Hezbollah targets, and then they accidentally destroy a bunch of orphanages and hospitals and things like that. Then we send more money over to redevelop Lebanon. And then we take in a bunch of people who have been internally displaced, and then call it a day. This is the neoliberal ethos. They want a bunch of slaves in the United States. Everyone benefits. Arms dealers get to sell more arms. Developers get to develop. Governments, they get to siphon some money on the side, embezzle it. And then the neoliberals get tens of thousands more human slaves in the United States and other parts of the Western world. That's basically what's happening. But it's happening at an inconvenient time for the Kamala Harris administration. Because at the moment, you've also got a major humanitarian disaster in the United States. FEMA coming out and trying to conspiracy theory the so-called conspiracy theorists, saying, no, we're not preventing aid from reaching these people. Yeah, that's why they have to bypass all of your roadblocks and go through flooded creek beds and stuff like that in order to get aid into some of these communities in the general region that's been hit hardest by the hurricane. Yeah, they're doing that because FEMA's being so kind in helping them facilitate the movement of goods. I like how they call it a conspiracy theory, but it's not. See, this is the age of the smartphone. This is the age of the smartphone and Starlink and things like that. People can set up remote points, in the middle of nowhere and, you know, they can still record what's going on. We've had a number of videos and audio clips and stuff showing that this is happening. And even if it isn't doctrinal, even if it isn't centrally organized that this is a decision that FEMA and these groups are making, it is happening. It is not a conspiracy theory. It is a conspiracy fact. The fact is that this is happening. It's sort of like, you remember some years ago, there was major flooding. I can't remember exactly where it was. I think it was Alabama or something. And then the Cajun Navy came in to, you know, rescue people and deliver aid because the government was incapable of doing so. This is why I believe in individualism. Because the government isn't there to save you. The government's there to rob you blind and then go bomb people and then bring in refugees to replace you. That's basically what's happening here. Kamala Harris looks completely callous because here's the thing. The U.S. government is incepted to represent the interests of the U.S. people. It's not incepted to look after the interests of anyone else in the world. Not the Lebanese, not the Canadians, not the Australians, not the Chinese, not people from Mali, not Brazilians, nobody else in the world. First and foremost, it should be an America First policy in the doctrinal sense. It's the only point of having the U.S. government at all. The whole point is to have a representative body representing you. In her capacity as the second in command of the executive branch, it is therefore very callous and very interesting that Kamala Harris instead chooses to focus on Lebanon. At a time when there are millions of people that are without power, that are without basic necessities, right here in the United States, it seems very callous. She's taking an absolute beating over this issue because it's like, you know, how out of touch can you possibly be? And it is very, very out of touch, by the way. I've never seen anything quite like it before. Can you imagine if Trump were in office right now and the same situation happened? And he said, well, we're going to send $500 million over to the Lebanese that we've ourselves have been funding the bombing of. And meanwhile, there are a bunch of people in the United States that don't even have the ability to get together a fucking meal. I think that wouldn't go over well. I think he'd be crucified by the legacy media. And rightfully so under such circumstances. But when it's Kamala Harris, it's like, well, it's a slow news day today. Here's that Iowa water buffalo story. Interesting story, but it's not exactly as hard-hitting as, you know, half of Asheville having been buried in a mudslide. And this should not be happening. It's totally unacceptable. And we find out, of course, that pittance that they're giving people in the affected area, the $750, if your insurance later covers, some of your costs, you have to pay that back too. You know, you have to give the $750 back to FEMA, money that they don't even really have anyway because it's all been used to facilitate mass migration and things like that. The entire situation makes absolutely no sense. They always say Trump's is the chaos candidacy. He was the chaos president. What's happening right now in the world? I believe that it's far more chaotic than anything we saw in, let's say, 2017, 2018. Up until the lockdown-erist period, there wasn't a whole lot of chaos that wasn't the result of left-wing agitators under the Trump presidency. You didn't have this kind of thing going on. I like how they're trying to blame Trump for the shitty response to, well, Trump gutted FEMA. Yeah, Trump is what caused the Kamala Biden administration to expend enormous amounts of funds from FEMA on mass migration. He forced you to do that because that's obviously on his priority list. It was one of his core ideologies. He wanted more illegal immigration into the country. None of this is true. It's all a pile of horseshit. None of it is true. It's a complete lie. And for the government, by the way, to be using taxpayer money as well to field social media accounts to spin reality and make it out as though it's a conspiracy theory is also completely unconscionable. That money too should be going to aid relief for the people in the affected zone in North Carolina and in surrounding areas. The hurricane hit hard. We've got another one on the way to Florida right now. It's probably going to be a Cat 3. I think it makes landfall today if I remember correctly. It's going to slam a jammer right into the middle of Tampa. Tampa is literally the epicenter of where this is going. It's going to cause considerable damage. Probably not as bad as North Carolina because Florida is more of a super flat, but it's going to cause shoreline damage. There will be a storm surge. It's certainly going to cause wind damage. There's going to be a lot of insurance claims that have to be made. If you're in that area, by the way, and you don't have, I guess hurricane insurance or whatever the hell you would have, then probably that's not a good thing. Well, you know, I had never liked the location of my RV camper. You know, I put it up on blocks on this little piece of property, but I didn't really like the neighbors. Thankfully, the wind and the storm surge, you know, washed it over a few blocks. I like these neighbors a lot better. Oh wait, there are none because they got washed away too. That could end up happening, by the way, unfortunately. So clankers in that particular zone, batten down the hatches and make sure that you have some extra shit on hand. Kamala is ignoring North Carolina. She goes there for an afternoon and cackles as she slowly fills up relief bags for a handful of people for a photo op. She probably did it for 15 minutes. Then her hands got tired. You know, she's so busy doing this when she's cackling, her hands get tired. I pointed out the other day, and it was funny, nobody's going to feign at a Kamala Harris rally because you'll only be waiting in line for like 10 seconds. But if they did, they'd have their wallet stolen and then their shoes, and then somebody would be twerking next to their dying body while a bunch of TikTokers took videos of it. She's completely ignorant and out to lunch, and Trump really needs to make this particular post a campaign. This should go in a campaign ad, actually. Kamala, in her own words, she's too busy worrying about what's happening half a world away to worry about what's happening in her own backyard, in a country that she claims to want to represent as chief executive. Because she doesn't care about you. If anything, the reason why they won't let her go to the directly affected zone is because if she's walking along on a ruined road and she sees someone's dead body sticking up out of the ground, she's going to break down laughing. You know it. I know it. Goddamn liberals know this. She laughs at inappropriate moments, at inappropriate things. She's a psycho. She's not going to represent the United States if she's elected, and there's a reason why she's now fallen back behind in the battleground state matchups. She's falling behind in national polling. All signs are flashing red for the Democratic Party, and I'm not surprised. I'm just hoping that the damage trickles down ballot, honestly. I'm hoping that the Democrats get thoroughly punished for what they're doing right now. You got Hillary Clinton and John Kerry coming out in the same week saying basically free speech bad. You've got the complete ignoring of Asheville and surrounding areas. You've got the dual funding of the bombing of Lebanon while then rebuilding Lebanon to grift and embezzle. You've got statements with regards to taxation that are abhorrent. Hey, you know, we're going to have an unrealized gain tax and literally cripple the economy. And by literally cripple, I'm not being hyperbolic there. But sometimes I can wax a little bit hyperbolic. That's not hyperbolic. And mainline economists agree with me. That would cripple the economy. That's a terrible idea. But Kamala Harris has seriously suggested this, and some of her suggestions are just political theater. I was wondering, like over the next few days, Trump laid out a slurry of different policy proposals at the Butler rally. How many of them is she going to steal? How many of those policies will she steal simply because they're popular? She'll focus group them, Hillary Clinton mode. She'll take a focus group of randomly sampled people, and she'll say, okay, and they'll say, okay, are you for or against this policy, that policy, so on forth. If it gets more than 50%, then she's for it. If it gets less, then she's against it. If it's right on the mark, then she flips a coin. That's Kamala Harris. She's an empty suit. She's completely ignorant. She doesn't know what the fuck she's doing. Border czar that visited the border exactly twice, gave one presser so far as candidate, did a shitty job at the debate, was completely vacuous. I mean, again, doesn't even know what she's talking about half the time. If the teleprompter goes off, she doesn't even know what to say. She can't talk unscripted. There's no way she can conduct diplomacy. Yeah, she's going to get into a room with Xi Jinping. She's really going to have a meaningful conversation with him. She's going to know, number one, what she's saying, and number two, she's going to be able to counter it. She's going to be able to step toe-to-toe with Xi Jinping. No, I'll tell you what will happen if she gets elected. Potentially, she collapses the economy and potentially starts a big war, the one that we're directly involved in, simply to show that she's one of the boys. That's basically Kamala Harris. That's about all. Peace out.